us, oh God, to get the message across, Lord, in the manner which is supposed to be reached, to go across, Lord Father. I thank you, Lord Jesus, for everything that you have done for us and for what you will continue to do. In your holy and precious name I pray. Amen.
Let me just crave everybody's indulgence as we observe 1 minute silence in respect of the untimely passing of the 4 comrades: Kazim Ali Jr., Yusuf Henry, Rashid Nagasa, Faisal Kuban. Wednesday afternoon to the members of the media, thank you for coming to cover some brief but very important statements regarding that most unfortunate incident at Paria on the 25th of February earlier this year. We thought it necessary to put back into the public domain, indeed to place on public records for yet another time what we were saying post the incident, immediately after the incident where the 4 comrades, the 4 divers, Kazim Ali Jr., Yusuf Henry, Rashid Nagasa, and Faisal Kurban were trapped in a pipeline, an undersea line in Paria at Point Paria. That when the incident occurred, the union, that's the OWTU, was making some very important statements and making some very important demands and calls and requests. And today, we are very saddened again for yet another time, but we are vindicated because what the public is being fed now through different parts of the commission of that inquiry that is ongoing, what is being revealed is exactly what we were saying. But first I want to make an essential but crucial point, that such an incident, such an unfortunate taking of the lives of 4 individuals, 4 human beings, 4 persons, 4 breadwinners, 4 sons and brothers and fathers, would have never happened under the Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago, where there was an oil field. That they consciously and deliberately got rid of the OWTU, that's the government, headed by Keith, Christopher, Columbus, Rowley, Stuart Young, and the lot, got rid of the OWTU to put in place an entity that would see absolutely no regulation, very little safety and so on, no procedures. The devil take the hindmost, the result of which took place on February 25th, earlier this year. And that the Paria, the company, is still positioned for situations like that to occur, simply because of the same approach, getting rid of regulations and so on, which they consider to be an hindrance, but which is really there to protect lives and limbs of persons who perform important tasks. And therefore, had OWTU, the recognized majority union under Petrotrin, which tasks were regularly performed, which was a normal task, but which task was performed safely because of procedures being followed, safety measures being put in place, contingency plan if anything had gone wrong in place, all of which was not in place. But what you would have occurred, the most you would have heard, is that the union shut down the work to insist that safety procedures are put in place. And for the public would have heard that work shut down in Pointe-à-Pierre, in the Marine Department, because OWTU is insisting that safety procedures are followed. But that was not the case. And take your mind back, because the public was also reminded about an earlier incident where a worker would have lost his leg, simply because of the lack of safety procedures and so on. But even post losing the leg, how that was treated with is anybody's guess, simply because devil take the hindmost. And so they got rid of the OWTU, formed this company called Paria, headed by people who are not familiar, totally unfamiliar of the environment, with absolutely no experience. Chairman, you check the chairman. Who's the chairman of Paria? Check his experience with marine operation and marine work and so on. Check the general manager. Check on his experience in terms of marine work and the various functions that are required to be performed by workers, human beings. And you would recognize that it is virgin territory for those people. But that you can find high connection, friendship if you will, with those in high office, and that qualified them to do jobs for which they are not qualified, not competent, and which through those not being qualified and not being competent place lives at risk and indeed cause lives to be lost. And we do not want the public, the general public, for that to escape your attention as this inquiry went on. Our position is lucidly clear that the ones who are responsible have to be the ones who issue the contracts, the ones who own the facility, and the ones who are supposed to have and ensure proper measures, safety measures, proper regulations. All of the safety procedures are intact and indeed monitored and implemented. Sadly, that was not the case, and to the extent that an employer in this country or anywhere removes a union, which union has a specific function not only to negotiate wages and terms and conditions, but ensure safety at work and to ensure the USH Act is followed, to ensure that tools and equipments and so on, everything is in place to ensure the safety and the proper function, and that all activities are carried out safely. To remove the union is to not just to suggest, but to convince us and everybody who have eyes to see that what they wanted to do is to have their own way, pay starvation wages, compromise safety, and they and their friends at the top cream off all of the spoils. Well, today we are vindicated, but we are extremely saddened. Why? I'm going to remind the public of some of the things that we were saying from inception. From inception, we were insisting that those 4 divers, those 4 human beings, brothers, fathers, nephews, friends, 4 human beings were alive and trapped in that pipeline. We were insisting that. Today we are vindicated. As the records show, that they were indeed alive. We were insisting that the expert divers who are present, that they be allowed to go and rescue those divers trapped in the pipeline. They haven't the experience. They haven't performed those tasks before. But that this person was actually on the site, was not allowed to go in. We also say that the account given by the lone survivor, Christopher Boudram, whose submission yesterday brought tears not just to his eyes. I mean, words could hardly describe the emotions that poured from that individual, that Christopher Boudram yesterday, as he gave testimony to what occurred. And immediately, you know what we want to say about that? We condemn the badgering, the brutalizing of Christopher Boudram or any witness by lawyers, high-paid lawyers, attempting to make the victim into the villain, when the real villain is Paria. Yes. But I mean, this is like a bad horror movie. Some movie where you see the bad people pay high-priced lawyers to have their way, even after people die as a result of them not doing the proper thing. And that is unfolding before Trinidad and Tobago. And the OWTU cannot remain silent while that. We said it from inception. Allow the expert divers. We call on Paria, we call on the general manager, Mustaq Mohammed. No experience in that environment. We called on him. Allow the expert divers to go and rescue those who were trapped because they are alive. We also said that the account of hearing them, the noise knocking in the pipeline, told us that they were alive. It confirmed when we collaborated that with what was said by the lone survivor, Christopher Boudram. But they denied an opportunity which today those 4 divers, those 4 human beings would have been alive. Paria denied an opportunity for life for those 4 divers. Yes. And that to enforce it, they employed the services of the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard, whose role and function ought to be to save lives at sea and to rescue, and which Coast Guard ought to have a level and a capacity to treat with situations like that, which they did not. But if you don't have the capacity, you don't have the experience to go down beneath the sea and save lives into the pipeline, why on earth you would use your guns and you would use all of your artillery to prevent the saving of life? Why would you do that? That was done, Trinidad and Tobago. We were saying that, but not enough people were listening when we were talking. Not enough people were willing to form a brigade to go and to confront the Paria people to ensure that lives were saved. And now the chicken has come home to roost. We have seen exactly what we were saying. In Paria, you have people who are not competent at all levels. You have a person by the name of one, his name sounds familiar with Texas. He went from B-class plant fitter on the day when Petrotrin was shut down, November 30th, to the 1st of December he became a maintenance supervisor. B class, maintenance supervisor. Maintenance supervisor involving a complex activity as that one for which he had no experience. And that is at the lower level, Trinidad and Tobago. We will see all of that. Let the experts go and rescue. That did not happen. Paria, the Paria people, treated with the most disdain imaginable. The wives, the sisters, the mothers, women, and children of those divers that were trapped. So while they were trapped below, begging and pleading and hanging on to their life, Paria was dishing out the most unimaginable disdain, disrespect, and disregard treatment to the wives, to women. Literally left them out in the rain. No facilities at all, out in the rain. No information at all. Could you imagine what type of human being would be in charge of a national asset, and who in their right mind in government would allow these people to still be in their jobs after all of this thing happened? In any other country, any other place where normal people live, normal human beings are in charge of government, any other place where that is occurring, those persons would have been history. They would have been removed from their jobs. Yes. Moreover, in any serious country where we want a serious inquiry to be performed, to unearth the root cause and to take corrective actions, immediately they would have been removed, if only temporarily, sent on administrative leave or some kinds of leave outside of the environment. They were allowed to remain there to do what? To cover their tracks. And therefore, when you hear that you could hardly get witnesses, it is because they are there and they are intimidating the workers, threatening them with their very jobs if they only go to be witnesses. So how do you expect to get witnesses when you have the management still in place? The chairman is still there, the general manager is still there, and what is Colin Piper? Wherever he is still there. Yeah? Because before, during, and even now, he is one of the most incompetent persons that we have ever. He is a guru in incompetence. Yeah. And we know that. And so we were shocked to know that from before the company closed and after the company had closed, two different things. Have a band of incompetent people because they are prepared to go the route of being yes men, saying yes to everything and not challenging or not ensuring the safety of workers and indeed the safety of the operations. We condemn the approach of both Paria and the Coast Guard, who acted in concert to prevent the saving of lives. We want to put that back out in the public domain. We also want to bring to the attention of the national community that not only that those women, dependents, wives, sisters, were treated the way in which they were treated then, as if they had done something wrong. To date, Paria has not even reached out to any one of them to compensate them in any way, shape, or form, or to bring some sort of comfort. You know how these people are feeling now that this inquiry is going on and this thing has been rehatched fresh in their minds. The callousness and the callous nature of Paria 10 and continuing is being demonstrated by the caliber of the attorneys and the modus operandi to basher anybody who stands up to tell the truth. And we condemn that. You could find your way to pay your high-priced attorney and so on. But at the end of the day, Mr. Attorneys, these are human beings that you are dealing with. It's lives that were lost that we are dealing with. And in a situation where it was preventable. Preventable, because our point is that every one of those 4 lives could have been saved. Wrongling, incompetence, and so on, arrogance, ignorance, and a sort of approach. Me and this fella play golf together, we are best friends, so you can't tell me what to do. In fact, I was playing golf while this was happening. You can't tell me what to do. We are in charge, we are at large and we are in charge. And that is what is happening throughout Trinidad and Tobago today. Trinidad and Tobago. We are in a sort of a despotic arrangement, a sort of a top-down arrangement, a sort of a fight-down, a sort of a once you stand up for what is right, might take over. And my might is right no matter what, and we will do what we feel we should do, regardless of the cost. Those 4 lives must not be allowed to go in vain. Yes. Nobody else must die in Paria, indeed. No regulatory, no rescue mission in place, nothing, no plan, no proper plan, no proper planning throughout. And in case you think that you have a contingency plan should something go wrong, and something can always go wrong in an operation of that nature, you will think that there's a contingency plan in place. Absolutely nothing. They were like lifeguards who cannot swim. So someone is drowning, they run from the beachfront and hide while people drown. In this situation, they were silent, but even worse, they prevented the experience from saving lives. At that point, cannot be overemphasized. And let me just say, they would like to extricate themselves from that. They would like the contractor to be the fall guy, the scapegoat. They would wish that to happen. So blame the contractor, but they were the issuers of the contract. And that contract ought to be issued with certain guidelines and standards and procedures. And the only person to ensure that that is maintained apart from the contractor is the ones who issue it. And so that they are ultimately responsible as issuers of the contract and owners of the facility. They must not be allowed to get away at all. And that is the time emotions should explode in this country if the people, the management of Paria, are allowed to get away. Pay some high-priced lawyer, badger the witness, put your own spin on this inquiry, and then you walk away free while lives were lost through your own incompetence. We want to ask the question today. And I think this question is for the relevant authorities who are supposed to be the regulators from the top. What was the Minister and Ministry of Energy and as regulators, what were they doing between the 25th and the 28th? Yes. What was Young doing between the 25th and the 28th in relation to saving those lives? What was the ministry's role? What was the chairman doing between the 25th and the 28th? What was the general manager doing between the 25th and the 28th? Now, if we are not careful, they, through their high-priced attorneys, because you know, the witness doesn't have any attorney to guide him. So the witness is there by himself, and he's subject to the badgering and the bantering of the company's high-priced attorney. So you could talk to the witness who today we want to say that there's a God above, and thank God allowed him to be alive to tell the tale. Could you imagine? He is there and what they are doing. If he was not alive, indeed we were fearful for his life when he was in hospital. So much so such is the mistrust with those by us for those people. Thank God. God allowed him to live to tell the tale. Yes, because dead man tell no tale. God allowed him to live. And we empathize, we sympathize with him. We empathize and sympathize with all of the members of the family, even the community from where they came. Everybody. And we took note of his passion yesterday, of his emotions yesterday, overflowing emotions, because nobody knows, not even us, nobody could put themselves in the shoes of Budram. What he has to go through day after day after day, being a lone survivor, being one of those who were trapped beneath the sea. So, they would have pronounced those 4 human beings dead very early.
Yes.
Yes. While we were saying the contrary.
Yeah.
So with every precious passing minute and hour, we were saying, rescue them. Let them be rescued.
Yes.
But with every precious passing minute and hour, our pleas were disregarded. Disregarded, family disrespected. And those people, Trinidad and Tobago, may I remind you, they are the same people who continue to have their jobs. Something has to be. Trinidad and Tobago is not a real place under this PLM. No. It's not a real place under this PLM and under Dr. Rowley and Stuart Young. We are some other planet from some other place. It cannot be a real place where these people are still on their jobs, intimidating any potential witnesses that may want to come forward. Or they better don't get involved in that because you want a job. So they have to choose between putting food on the table and coming forward. And of course, the choice was made for the former. Recently, not too long ago, it may have been a month or so, don't hold me to the time, month, 5 weeks or so, there was another incident. This time not an accident, but an incident where a worker would have succumbed to some serious illness and passed away in the same Paria. And you would have seen the complaint of the father about the same treatment to him, similar to what was dished out to the family of those 4 earlier this year. So from then to now, they have not learned their lessons. Because you see, there's something about when you're connected high up, you feel you could do what you want, how you want, when you want, and to who you want. But there's a God. All of that could happen, but there's a timing for it to stop. And we call for it to happen to stop. And so today, members of the media, it is with great pain, high emotions, but great focus, and of course, proper recollection that all of what is coming out with respect to the timelines, with respect to these 4 human beings being alive, with respect to the fact that they were left for dead. All of that vindicates our position, but more than that, we are calling attention to these issues so that it would not fly under the radar, and that those who are culpable, they must not get away. And finally, I just want to call for criminal negligent charges to be brought. Anybody who is found culpable that contributed in any way, shape, or form to the taking away, the snuffing out of lives of these 4 individuals. May their souls rest in peace. And thank you for allowing me to give you the union's position as an update. We will continue, mind you, we will continue to, as it unfolds, not to do anything or to injure the inquiry, but to bring attention, public's attention, and to analyze in ways in which we know based on our own experience. And I think more than anybody else, anywhere else in Trinidad and Tobago, I say without fear of contradiction, or without fear of condemnation, or even without fear of confrontation, that if there's anybody who has the expertise and competence and experience to perform those tasks safely, it is the oilfield workers who are removed from their jobs prior to the 30th of November 2018. Thank you very much.
Question?
Yes.
Comrade Roget, at the end of the inquiry, should the findings align with the position held by the OWTU in terms of who is directly responsible and who is culpable? Don't you think that contributory negligence should be applied to LMCS as the employer of the divers, and their failure also to have a rescue team or a rescue mission in place should something go wrong?
Well, whoever is found to be culpable, we are saying that in spite of that, because those who issue the contract did not ensure, you don't do that after, you know.
Sure.
You make sure that those things are put in place before.
Sure.
And clearly, those who were responsible to make sure that they have it in place, they did not do that. They failed. Clearly, they failed. And therefore, the ultimate responsibility rests with those who issue the contract and those who own the facility on behalf of the state. Yeah? You check it? Yeah. So while the contractor ought to have A, B, C, D, E, yes, we can argue that and shift the blame right on the contractor. At the end of the day, he ought to be monitored, police to make sure that all of those things are put in place. But if you don't have competent people superintending this operation or making sure in your scope of work and in your tenets of that contract that all of those things in place, and moreover, making sure that they are monitored. If those things are not in place, well then what resulted on the 25th of February earlier this year will continue to be the case. Yeah? Paria is still operating. The slipshot work is still taking place. The number of HSE personnel prior to this incident, and certainly when Petrotrin was in operation, was a different construct, different numbers. HSE is contracted out. Yeah. Function like that. It's contracted out. So everybody who want to save their jobs will save precious little. And that's the system. So they operated a system, which system is sure to take lives. That's what we're saying, you know. And those who are responsible for the operation of that life-taking system, they ought to be held accountable. And that is Paria, from the very top to the bottom. All of them. sparing none. Yeah? But the management has the ultimate response. We cannot overemphasize that point. And therefore, Stuart Young must not be able to get away. Newman George must not be able to get away. Mustaq Mohammed must not be able to get away. Colin Piper must not be able to get away. And all of those other persons who yesterday there was Plan Fitter B, and today there's big maintenance supervisor, superintendent and supervising jobs, for which they have absolutely no experience, but simply because they want to eat a little piece of bread or put a little food on the table. Yeah? That is what is occurring. And may I just say, this is an enterprise that is owned by the state, owned by the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to make that point. And this is Dr. Rowley's version of a profitable petrogrid. This is Dr. Rowley's version of a shutting down and sending home and traumatizing thousands of workers and many thousands of people in the country, and further traumatizing them because of the situation with inflation and the purchase and the increase in the price of fuel 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. This is Dr. Rowley's version of governance. This is governance PNM backward style. We're reversing fast, downhill, no brakes, no steering, and we blindfold. That is what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. And that, and for condemning that, the union was removed. And this is what is in place. Trinidad and Tobago. And we have absolutely no fear, or we want no friends in telling the truth. That's where we are.
Roget, you call for the removal of different levels of management in this situation. Some might say that might be your optimistic goal. If the moon and if the ball shot there, among the start. But what is the realistic expectation of this inquiry?
But first of all, I like how you put it that my optimistic goal. Because I think that our optimistic goal is aligned with truth and decency and so on. And therefore, calling for the removal is not a strange thing to do, but it's the correct thing to do. And had we had proper governance in the country, the Prime Minister himself would have removed Newman George and Mustaq Mohammed and the management. The Minister of Energy, if he had any power at all, he would have removed them. That would not have been a question. So that is in place right now. They are still at their jobs. And we are saying that because there was no removal of the management or the persons who were at the time responsible, we have a problem with witnesses, because there could be the tampering of evidence, there could be the badgering of employees and the prevention of employees to come forward as witnesses and so on. All of those things could occur. And therefore, we are looking at the inquiry unfold with bated breath and to see what will come out of it. And every time we believe that a point should be highlighted or that was missed or that focus is shifted, we will be talking to the country through the medium of the media. What we expect that with this type of governance, this type of Prime Minister, and this type of Minister of Energy, they wouldn't do the right thing. We don't expect them to do the right thing. But we must always go on record, notwithstanding, of calling for the right thing to be done. Okay, and yes, we want to recognize. We want to recognize Rishi's Nagasa's wife. Yeah. And so we know that it is heart-wrenching, but it's necessary. These people will escape. They will press the escape button, and they will escape through the shortest route to freedom if we did not highlight. And they might very well escape, you know. Yes. But Trinidad and Tobago the citizens, the voters should judge them by how they treat. And that is unfortunately the predicament thus far. Yeah. So, any more questions from the comrade?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, okay, comrade. Go on.
No,
Okay.
clearly outlined, so.
Yes. And thanks, we want to thank you for coming, because let me just say, I want to thank the South media in particular. You know, making the statement might get you in problems with your editors, but we need to say it in any case. We commend and congratulate you for being fearless and for being responsive and so on to these issues, all of the issues. You always present yourself to capture the truth. What the editors do with it is another story. But we thank you, hard-working members of the media. We will defend your right to put and to print the truth any day. Yeah, and we'll stand firmly and resolutely behind you, because that is what it ought to be. Not the twisting and turning and shifting of focus and so on, as we see attempts are being made.
And on that, I don't have a question to ask you
Yes.
about this, but I've seen evidence of legal challenges being mounted against patriotic. And we just want some clarification regarding that. What exactly did the company do, for what services they were perform, and what is happening? Give us an update.
Yeah,
on
I'll
the
just give you,
status of that matter.
how that has concluded. We were in discussions with them to ensure that that matter is settled, and if it has not been settled today, it has been? Yeah, and that matter has been settled, and we consider that matter to be closed. Settled in terms of, you would recall that in the acquisition process, OWTU would have acquired certain services and so on. And so we were in discussions with various service providers to ensure that they are not only paid, but they continue to work with us going forward. The government, however, attempted to break the union by committing to sell something that they had a lien on. As it turned out, they could not sell the asset because the asset had a lien on it by international creditors and financiers and so on. So while they were saying they want to sell the asset, they just could not have done that. And therefore that process had to come to a halt. Well, legal advice is being sought on that in terms of dealing with the government. But insofar as the service provider is concerned, that issue has been settled and a way forward has been found. On two counts. One, because the government dragged us out with that process, and secondly, because we want to continue to work with them to ensure other projects which we are in contemplation and consideration, right? For instance, Guyana and Curacao and so on. Yeah? And Suriname.
Are you as patriotic indebted to any other service provider during that period?
Well, we would have engaged the services and we would have settled most of them, and we're in the process of settling all of them. So that is taking place.
I remember during those days you would have talked about the government setting out to bankrupt the union. Have they achieved?
No, absolutely not. Let me just say, I'm glad you raised that question, because the first thing we want to say that is wrong with the substance of the article is that the OWTU has not, Patriotic has not filed for any bankruptcy. We can't if we continue to be engaged in projects and so on. And so we want to put workers back to work. The government, through their modus operandi, remove workers from work. Our mission for establishing the company is to acquire those assets, and to put workers back to work. Competent workers that we know can perform a task which would result in the country not being under pressure as it is under right now. Yeah? And therefore, therefore, while that level of competence continue to be idle, we are in pursuit of projects elsewhere as we speak. So that's why you have a patriotic in existence. So if Stuart Young, Keith Rowley, vexed because we say that they are worse on crime than the government they replace, that they are more corrupt than the government they replace, that the level of governance is poor, that the level of competence is poor, and that they get vexed and that they try to penalize OWTU as a result of that. The world is open to us for patriotic to engage its services to put workers in. So while they allow the refinery to rot, you see that is happening, to deteriorate, where the country could have benefited. The patriotic energy services and patriotic technology continue to position itself to make attempts, we're not sitting idle, make attempts with the company to get projects going, to get workers. And I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, cat and bag. I don't like to play with cat and bag. So I don't want to get the cat out of the bag, but our hope is that pretty soon we should be making particular announcements and so on in that regard.
But you're still interested in operating the refinery?
We have the competence, first of all. We have all of the competent, able-bodied, experienced workers to go and to restart that refinery. The only ones that can do it and can do it safely, and the likes of which occurred in February the 25th earlier this year would not happen. I mean, you could never guarantee, but the extent to which that happened and the response, patriotic energies and technologies, you would not see that. So we are still ready. They are bungling. Remember they said they found someone, and to date they went silent on that because simply whoever it is don't have the capacity. And so while they offer us to sell, they couldn't sell. There was a lien, and they are making all kinds of different offerings right now.
The lien still?
The lien is still there, so they cannot sell it. So a different acquisition method ought to take place, not sale. They can't sell. The lien is still there. The same lien that they say they're sending home all of the workers. And if they didn't pay off that debt, they would have no bad. You remember that? Remember that Dr. Rowley said, Dr. Keith Christopher Columbus Rowley said to this country that if they didn't shut down Petrotrin, send workers home, they wouldn't be able to fix roads. Hospitals wouldn't problems. Schools wouldn't build schools. All of those things. We have the worst road, not in the universe. We have the worst roads. And everybody can attest to that. But don't talk about the healthcare system and the hospital. God forbid you go into the hospital for some emergency. God help you. You might get through until tomorrow morning. And if you get through alive. The schools are a problem. You talk to tutor and so on. Anything that is, everything in this country is bad under PNM and Dr. Keith. So you shut down Petrotrin, traumatize all of the workers throughout the entire southwestern peninsula and elsewhere in the country, and putting the country now under extreme pressure. Subsidies gone. Gas price raised what, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Gas price raised. With him, like if they just don't care, they're raising it. And so because they cannot do better. Scarce foreign exchange is even more scarce than it has ever been, simply because Petrotrin was a net provider of foreign exchange for this country. So when you go to the bank and they tell you you have no foreign exchange, even though you are not a Petrotrin worker, you are affected by what Dr. Rowley did to Petrotrin because there is less foreign exchange. And let me tell you, the little foreign exchange that they have, that comes from the other, like NGC or so, or from the Point Lisas Industrial Estate, the little less foreign exchange they have to use most of that to buy fuel with the foreign exchange, and then sell it back for local TT dollars. You tell me where in the world That makes sense. But then, PNM and Dr. Rowley and sense does not go in the same sentence. Yeah? And you want to close again by saying, with great grief, unfortunate emotions and sadness, that if perpetrator was in operation, today we would have had with us a Kazim Ali Jr., a Yusuf Henry, a Rashid Dagisa, and a Faisal Kurman. Thank you very much.